Welcome to Loop TV. I'm your host, Gene Munster, along with a man who needs no introduction, Horace Dediu. Horace knows everything about Apple and broader tech, and our conversation today is about Apple's ambitions in auto and the broader transportation opportunity. And so, for those of you who are not up to speed, rumors last week that Apple's advancing towards some initiative unknown in the car space and kind of threw out a target of 2024 for a potential launch of a car. I'm going to pause there. And Horace, question for you is when you think about maybe the broader auto opportunity, what lens do you look at it through?
Well, I'm lucky or unlucky, I don't know how to say it, but I've experienced both the personal computer and the mobile phone disruptions, as you're well aware of. These were sort of the seminal transitions what we underwent in our lifetimes. And to me, what's been happening with auto is very similar to me to what happened to these other industries when they got injected with software. Andreessen called it, that software is eating the world. I think of it as more like when software enters into a pre-existing system, it gets transformed to the point where those who write the software come to dominate it. It's a little bit lengthier way of describing the process, but if you ask yourself, how can a software get injected into an industry? We saw it in the entertainment industry. We saw this in the telecommunications industry. And by the way, the telecommunications industry is like the auto industry, a century in the making, huge amount of infrastructure, entrenched players, everyone assuming that it cannot change. I went through all that. So I'm seeing it again. I've been paying attention to the auto industry since about 2015, when I started asking this question, how will these digital technologies transform it? And it's been a very long ride, and it's a very resistant change industry. And so that's why I'm very fascinated about how Apple could play a part.
When you think about the paradigm shift, one way that I've captured it is with the phone, we shifted to a computer in your pocket. In this case, we think about a computer on wheels. Is that a similar view that you have,
Yeah,
or is this
I
still?
use the exact phrase. I actually say it's a smartphone on wheels.
Oh, nice.
But that's when I think about micromobility, so really tiny vehicles. But the car is maybe the computer on wheels, the PC on wheels. In many ways, I think that analogy holds. So the question is, can it absorb software? And first, let me just point out why the incumbents are having a hard time. It feels a lot, again, like the Nokias and the Motorola's and the incumbent Ericsson and Lucent and all those companies in the sort of mid 2000s that couldn't get the software revolution to help them. And the thing about automakers is that they have a huge lead time for anything. This is one of the open secrets of the industry. If you want anything done in automotive, plan on 5 years to get it actually done. If we look at CarPlay, CarPlay is like the rocker that Motorola and Apple
Oh,
collaborated
yeah.
on.
How could I free up?
Yeah. So the idea is, Apple tries to put software in the car indirectly via the phone coupling to the entertainment system. And it's just a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of the whole puzzle. And they're sort of been learning. It's been like almost a decade of that. And they still haven't cracked the nut. And that's the problem with the auto industry. And it's one of the criticisms I have, and I think this is what you're sensing as well, is that how can we time this? Because things take so long, and even Apple entry takes so long. Tesla, by the way, is 15 years old, and they're still only making 500,000 cars, which gives them negligible market share. 15 years to get this far. Think about what it would take to get to 1 million for Apple, 1 million vehicles. What would it take to get to 2 million? And then you're not even at BMW's level. What would it take to get to 10 million? And that's finally when you get to the top three, the Toyotas, the VW, and the Nissan Renault Alliance. So those are the big targets. And I think if Apple were to play in this game, it would want to be there. And by the way, those three giants are themselves combined only 30% of the market. So Apple is like barely 15 to 20% of the phone market. And it took them a decade. But to get there in the car industry, it's a real question of how long it would take given the
Let me
complexity
ask,
involved.
Horace, let me ask this. When we think about that, we think about where the incumbent automotive players are. Dare I ask you to grade the auto industry? A grade would be they're in a great position for the next decade, and F would be we're going to see some of these companies not be around in the next decade. Maybe just
Well,
to kind of level set us, what grade would you give the
I think
traditional
a
automotive?
decade, yeah, a decade is a short time. I think they'll definitely be around. But again, let me just put it this way. all the companies in the phone industry got digital in the sense that they went on to 2G and 3G networks. They switched over from analog fairly easily. And I think the automakers are going to switch over from internal combustion to electric. But that's not the problem. The problem is to move people, not to move electric batteries around. Think about, do you care about making modems today? Do you care about the cost of transporting bits today? None of these things matter. They used to matter a lot in the 20th century. Those were the very, very sort of profitable businesses as
Mhm.
far as communications were concerned. So now in the auto industry, it's like, do we really care about the machine that moves people around, or should we think about ecosystems? Or should we think about, creating value out of the 1 hour a day that people spend in cars? And that, by the way, that's a constant. The 1 hour a day has been always around. This is why we can't nail this problem simply by counting cars and counting batteries and counting trips or even counting miles. It's much more about what do people want to achieve with transportation? How can we help them get to those goals? And I think this is the thing about the automakers. I once talked to an auto executive and I said, wouldn't you like it to be paid every time you deliver a customer to a destination? Let's say you deliver someone to a restaurant and they pay you so much, but if you deliver them to a better restaurant that can charge more money, that restaurant should pay you more. Wouldn't that be nice? I'll tell
Yeah.
you this, it was somebody at Mercedes and they said, boy, we've been dreaming that all our lives. How do we make it happen? That's
So
exactly the problem. They get paid for the box. They didn't get paid for delivering somebody to a better destination.
let me pause
Gets
there
paid.
and go back and press you for a grade on the auto industry, how they're doing today. Let's just say that relative to
I would give
these
them a C
ambitions.
minus, C minus at best. I mean, they have a chance of failing completely, but I think they might be able to pull out. And it's also a diverse group. Toyota might do well. Maybe, all US automakers not so well.
Okay, thank you. And then we're going to talk about the two different paths here. And we're going to get back to the Apple question, but I want to establish two different paths. One is selling cars, the other is what you just described with the conversation with an OEM and the ability to deliver people, the amount of time spent in cars, and which opportunity. I think I got it here, but just want to confirm between selling vehicles that would be autonomous or just moving people and things around. The bigger opportunity is
The bigger opportunity is going to be long term in moving people to their destinations. But even more than that, beyond that, the bigger opportunity would be redirecting people. The way the internet makes money today, whether it's Google or Facebook or even Apple, ultimately, is not because they're getting you to the server you want to punch in the number for
right.
or the phone call that you want to make. It's about getting you to destinations that you never thought of doing or going to, or activities that you may never thought of doing and getting those done. So all of that has been the creation of new opportunity. That's what that really fuels the internet. And so the transportation world, it's all about getting you A to B. What about going to C instead? Now, if you can
Awesome.
redirect from B to C, now that would be a couple of $1 trillion right there.
That is a next level insight and not surprised to hear it from you. I know you spent a lot of time studying mobility. So we're going to move it back to the starting point here and talk about Apple. And where do you think they're at relative to either auto or mobility or transportation?
So here's my struggle. I believe they understand this dilemma that they don't want to build metal boxes, that they really want to deliver people to places and perhaps new places and create new opportunities. I believe this. I have no evidence. I'm just believing it because that's how they think. They also think about that in terms of phones. The problem of really transforming transportation into something that is effectively the way, what I expect is we'll see them initially actually deliver on a basic product and then move from there into sort of the more advanced business models that we talk about. Don't forget, I think that perfection is the enemy of good enough. I think they're going to launch with something a little bit more mundane, a little bit more like let's get our feet wet, and then eventually evolve into a super business that's going to be later. I wouldn't be discouraged if all they do is ship a car. I'm just hoping that they move beyond that fairly quickly. It's just you can't get beyond it without initially launching a car or a vehicle of some kind. So I think that's going to be the path forward for them is like, we got to get in this business. We got to walk before we can run. So we'll see something there. And again, the question is timing. The question is market definition. There's a lot of definitions out there. We can look at form factors. We can
Let
look at
me let
things
me
yelled at.
ask this: when you think about the walk before we run approach, would this be a Apple branded car?
Well, that would be the most basic option. It would be like saying, the iPod of the business. The iPhone would be something that's more of a service plus product, and it would be something along the lines, I call it Apple Go Plus. Apple Go Plus would be like a monthly service. You pay your monthly rate, maybe bundled with Apple One, and it's effectively a promise that you can go anywhere at any time. And that would really be the job to be done. I have things to do and I got to go there. In many ways, they'll be blending the shared car business with the manufacturing of car businesses, and that's how to deliver on that. How long? I don't know.
I'll add that is that in speaking with people close to what Apple's been trying to accomplish, my sense is that this network is the bigger opportunity. I think Tim Cook is really aware of the dangers of automotive and being able to have a fleet that ultimately has some control, greater control. Apple has greater control over what the safety and the experience is, seems to be appealing. And so that concept resonates. And let me ask another question about the go to market. Do you think that the opportunity for Apple just to license, think about taking CarPlay to the next level in autonomy features or batteries inside of a Ford or Volkswagen, is that a realistic go to market?
Again, it's a rocker problem. You'd like to do that ideally, or even the Apple TV problem. You want to basically just let everybody have access to your device and or your technology, embedding it. You let content be in a separate, and it just hasn't worked for them. And because it
Right.
is so hard, without integration, you can't deliver on the promise. You
That
just can't
rocker
get it done.
That rocker analogy is powerful, and I had been thinking that a branded car, them doing design and kind of running the experiences makes most sense, but there's still an opportunity for them to kind of license. But when you put it that way, I need to rethink the probabilities of that licensing model, and it makes a
License
ton of sense.
models work after you've established everything, and it's like franchising. You start the restaurant, and after you start about five of them, you think, well, maybe I can let somebody else run this, and you sort of take out the essence and you license it out. But you don't get to McDonald's with 2,000 outlets without first having a handful of McDonald's on your own, right? That's how all franchising
Mhm.
works. Is you got to prove the model and then package it and be able to distribute it to people who can operate it. And we're not there yet. We're not there with this core type technology of sort of getting people wherever they want to go with a shared service that is a custom vehicle with a custom experience within it.
Incredible. The last question is timing. Who knows, but what's your best guess?
This is the thing about the tension between good enough and perfection. At some point, they got to say, hey, we got a fish or cut bait here. Let's decide quickly on. I mean, I think they've had a couple of failures to launch because they just felt that it wasn't good enough. And now they're asking themselves, well, hey, we can't wait forever for perfection. So we got to decide something good enough. Where is that threshold right now? I think they got to launch because the EV market is starting to take off. Not to say that they would be amiss launching halfway through that S curve, but I think they feel like they better get in before it's 2 to 3% in penetration in the market. So that would put it to about 2024 timeframe. Again, I think that's probably where this rumor comes from. It's hard to say. Maybe it's supply chain oriented as well. But I'm thinking that's when they're going to really be under a lot of pressure to launch.
And one last question on the timing. And we expect that we'd see some of these cars in the wild a year, 2 years, just in testing? Apple comes, they announce it, and then
Yeah,
there's
yeah, I heard your thesis on this, and you're right. There's be a lot of evidence. It's not like the phone, which could be hidden away. Cars end up having to go on roads, and often they're disguised in some, and they'll have to have a lot of permissions and things like that. So I would say though that maybe is roughly 2022 when we're going to start seeing some prototypes out there. Maybe they won't be able to keep the lid on.
and let's bring it all together for the company's valuation perspective. Does it mean anything to pursue the transportation market?
It's funny, isn't it, that actually the businesses that are most profitable for Apple, the ones that are sort of not that sexy as far as the investors are concerned, and those that are like fairly low margin, which we're hearing about in automotive, do get a lot of attention. I can't really explain that. I think it has a lot to do with there's a need to sort of do something with about the environment and about all these issues and a lot of pent up demand. But it's tough to make a business out of selling cars or even sharing cars. So they'll have to be very clever about it to be keeping up their sort of historic margin levels. But I don't expect the car will be in itself a margin boost. It'll probably decrease their margins. But because they're in an area which is indeed trillions of dollars, they're going to get some good a bump in their valuation as a result.
That's my sense too, is that near term it would be negative for margins, but just the size of the addressable market. You can look at hours driven. You could look at number of cars sold. We're talking, as you said, multi-trillions of dollar market. Apple's a 300 and call it $15 billion company. To move the needle, it's just a massive lever. And I think separately, if you look at valuation on any company that's getting close to doing this, it is through the roof. I know, Horace, you've talked about put a Tesla multiple on Apple stock, and it is in the stratosphere. And I just think if they get just a small piece of that, I think that it would be most accretive to valuation. We're going to end there. And Horace, couldn't have a better guest to give us some light in this dimly lit room. Thank you for your insights on behalf of Horace and myself, Gene, and Loup TV. Bye for now.